The first month of this new year is over, and it's time to recap what has taken place this last month and what will happen in February. Obviously, the main thing is the TrackMania Grand League, but there have also been other stuff taking place. See, I did a 2018 recap. You guys weren't too happy about me being alone, so this time I'm joined by actually two guys to make this a more pleasant listening for you guys. Scottie, you have been here before, but in case I get some new fans in this new year, can you introduce yourself for the viewers?
Well, I suppose I'm a veteran of this podcast business now. I'm a TrackMania player for M&M formerly, a bit of a caster. Don't really stream as much anymore, but used to cast some events and stuff like that. So you know me from playing and crashing a lot on some big tournaments, but yeah, otherwise playing and streaming every now and then.
And the next guy is actually the last guest on the podcast, so back to back. I believe that's also some sort of historic happening. B1ts, if people didn't catch the last episode, can you say who are you and what do you do in TrackMania?
Well, I could call myself a TM veteran, played since like 2006, and currently playing for Team Venture, and also participating in the currently ongoing TrackMania Grand League. Yeah.
Let's start off with that Grand League. I believe you placed 4th in that event. How did you as a player view this first stage, and how did it go for you?
Well, I didn't know what to expect, to be honest, but as it started, it was pretty clear that the level was really high, and it was pretty difficult to get even top 8. And overall, I think it was a good start for the tournament. And I mean, the fact that I got 4th, I guess we can get into it a bit later, but it just showed how there are some fixes that still need to happen in terms of format and and some other things.
Scottie, you have spectated this event and not been a player. What is your first impression of this TrackMania Grand League when we actually see the Champions mode being in effect?
Well, the Champions mode, I suppose, was one of the key points of this first stage, as of course the qualifiers weren't containing the Champions mode. That was a fix made later on after some feedback by the community. But first impressions were, I would say I wasn't as much a big a fan of it, as we saw, of course, Scottie performing extremely well throughout the first stage. Of course, again, this is the first time it's been implemented in the first stage played only earlier, but of course we saw later on he had some unfortunate, I saw some either bug or his controller had died or something like that, and he went from first to joint last as a result of one small problem, so to speak. So it left a bit of a bitter taste, to be honest, but it still showed us that it can create some exciting moments. So I guess maybe a few fixes and we might get ourselves a nice working system going forward.
Yeah, if we talk first about the first impression, for me it was actually a good first impression because you had this new overlay with the left screen. You can see kind of clear who is in front and who is behind. They get a red sort of background when they drop and a green if they go ahead. And you also have these facts about the players, best times and so on. So the production value seems at least to be good, and but is that where we stop, and is the Champions mode something that you wanna remove almost for the second stage, Scottie?
Well, first of all, I will give massive kudos again to, exactly as you're saying there, the production value, like the new overlay and such, how we were able to interact with that. It's a big upgrade in what we've had previously, and I very much look forward to seeing if that's integrated to other places of TrackMania, like hopefully some other LAN events will get access to the same kind of features and such. It was very, very nice to look upon, very informative, exactly as you're saying, and looked really easy on the eye. But I mean, I don't necessarily think Champions mode is the worst thing in the world, but such problems caused by today showed that there is clearly some amendments we could make to it to make it a more viable competitive format, more satisfying for both players and spectators alike. But not necessarily the worst start off, but there is, as I said, definitely some improvements we can look at.
I said when the format itself was gonna be announced and you had this rule about 9 to 16 are gonna lose points, I said people are gonna be fucked over by it, and eventually I was correct and we got a perfect example. Scrappy leading after map 4 and then getting last. Bits, how is that playing into an effect when you as a player is playing? You knew the map order before. Were you training, let's say, map 1 as much as you trained map 5?
Yeah, well, the truth is that me personally, I try to train pretty much equally all the maps, but I was lucky in the sense that the last map was my favorite, and I definitely put a bit more time into that one. But overall, I think, well, first of all, as a player, I'm not sure how the viewer quality was, so I'm gonna be interested in checking the VODs out. But as a player, I can say it wasn't laggy or anything. The overlay was nice, and the system itself is definitely something we brought to Softy, because we had a debrief just recently, and we did address some of these issues, and I can confidently say there will be changes to the point system, and I'm not sure exactly how it's gonna go, but there will definitely be some changes to look forward to.
You said you are part of this debrief conversation just after the event. Is there any info that you can give to the people who wasn't part of it, like me and like probably the listeners?
Well, basically we started talking about how overall it went, and Softy himself was pretty happy, and so were the players. In general, they were pretty satisfied. Then we talked about the maps, and most players again were pretty satisfied. And Softy said that the maps will be going slightly towards technical maps, but not entirely. We'll still have to check that. And the other big issue that we talked for the most of the debrief was the format itself and the issues with the scoring system. And I'm not sure exactly how that's gonna change, but there will be definitely changes to the fact that maybe you won't lose all the points if you're 9th to 16th, and pretty much that was the majority of what they talked about.
Yeah, and this fact that you lose points if you are finishing 9 to 16, for me as a spectator, the most interesting part was actually to see who was number 9 and will eventually lose all the points, instead of actually watching who was in front and maybe the best battles we will miss out on. Scottie, do you favor a format where you not necessarily focus on who is in front and who can actually win the race, but rather who is behind and is trying to, not do the mistakes so they lose all the points? That we are used to focusing on who gets the 10 points in cup mode. Now we are more focusing on who is not losing the points. As a spectator, what do you think about this sort of shift in how the casters are providing the info and what the mentality is?
Well, in general, I think focusing upon the, say in our case, the top 16, focusing upon the mid to later stages of the pack is, in my impression, both from watching it and my opinion, just looking at it just on paper, is going to be less interesting than it would had you been having the top to fight for with such a very high skilled and well numbered pack, of course, as having 16 players all fighting for a top spot. Of course, while it is a bit longer, as with the multi-laps and such, I feel if you're going to be looking at who's going to be making mistakes, the pack is eventually going to spread out, and you're going to be looking at players who aren't performing as well, so the skill level is not going to be as on display when you are looking at people who are further back in the pack, and you're counting on it being very close between the players who are, say, 8th and 9th for it to actually be an interesting fight. Whereas you could have players who are, setting the world alight all the way up at the top of the field, going toe-to-toe, having a fantastic battle that's going to go largely unseen because the eyes, rightly so with the format, are going to be on the mid-level performers of the pack, which I think is a negative change from what we're used to, as I don't think it displays the player's skill as much, unless, say in the example we had on the last map, say a Scrappy has a big moment, so to speak, and then we see him fighting back as we know he's capable, and that kind of builds up a bit of tension. But I feel again that's something that we could work towards, showcasing what the best players of the map and the round are doing, rather than those who have made the most mistakes.
Yeah.
This format on this tournament is based on this. It should be easier for the viewer to watch, and it should be easier to understand this. To be honest, I have watched pretty much all the TrackMania events in the last year, and I'm having a hard time following all the 16 players, and I believe that Riolo himself also had it, because it's 16 players, so you, as a one guy, you are pretty much impossible to keep up with everybody. Bits, if you are to suggest something, should it be more casters and probably more people helping out the caster? Because Riolo, in fact, he missed out on Scrappy when he made the most crucial mistake.
Well, I'm not sure about it. Like, in my opinion, again, well, maybe Scottie could answer first, because I'm still not sure about.
Yeah, sure. Scottie,
You're actually a cast.
You're actually a caster yourself, and would you favor having more casters for this format? Is it this format actually opening up for more spots, maybe 2 or 3 casters?
Well, the problem with things not being seen, I don't think necessarily comes down to the format. I think there's an important point to look at in this, is not necessarily on, as in there's so many people on the track and things like that. The most important thing, which I think is resulting in things getting missed, is the nature of the maps and the fact that it's multi-lap. So you're having very, very long, shall we classify them as rounds, so to speak, as in from start to finish, lap 1 until lap 10. We're talking maybe, we can be up to 10 and 15 minutes per map. And that's going to result in a very, very well spread out field. Even for those that are doing very well, there's going to be a few tenths between them up at the top. As in, if you spectate someone who's, say, 6th, you might not be able to see who's in first from there. And if you spectate someone further back, chances are they might even be like all on their own somewhere. So I think that's a big problem, in the sense of the transition from what we're used to in cup modes. We're used to tracks that are, of course, harder, but they are maximum, say, 1 minute and 15 seconds long. So it's all in short bursts, as in, a player's failed, but there'll normally be players there at the top, and you can see everything that's happening from a set player's perspective. I think that is a problem caused by the nature of the I suppose, yes, the format being that it's multi-lap, so it's so long. And again, gradually the field gets spread out. So there's always going to be things that are going to be missed. And it's hard from a casting point of view, because, from doing dual casts myself, it's quite hard to point out things without interrupting and stepping over people. It can result in a bit of a mess, which I think you would need to have quite a well-established casting duo for that to work and work seamlessly, at least from my experience. So I guess, again, some changes that could be made to that. Example, either shorter maps or maps that are going, or maybe not as many laps or something like that, and do it maybe a few rounds on each map or something like that. Could be maybe beneficial changes to make it a bit easier on the spectator and give them more than just an overlay to look at to keep up with what's going on track.
Anything to add there, Bits, or?
Well, I had one idea. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, well, I think one minor issue is the fact that as casters, certain they want to display most of the players, and in doing that, they might miss the most important fights at the top. And I think it's important to highlight all the players, but it might end up like you could miss the crash at the top, or some interesting fight that instead they could be watching. So I think having more casters is definitely a good approach to have. And overall, I think more casters from overall would be like the idea Nadeo should push, and try to have more coverage from more regions, and focus on, so each caster can focus on their player and things like that.
Yeah, and talking about more casters, we actually had a French cast and a Polish cast today as well. the French cast, the Solari, drawing in like 16,000 viewers, and the Polish cast 2,000 viewers. And looking at these numbers, do you think that the developer in Hillis himself will see this first stage as a success and therefore be more, let's say, not up to making more changes bits?
Yeah, I think he had a positive image from what he saw, and I definitely hope he's gonna keeps himself slightly more involved and advertise the matches even more. And yeah.
And you, Scottie, what do you think about these numbers? Is this numbers sort of bringing Nadeo into a happy place, and now they see that they have the big numbers, but this is due to the fact that actually there's one big channel streaming it, because the English cast just had 400 viewers.
It's very much a double-edged sword, in my opinion. It's something I've spoke a lot about, both privately and publicly. But the thing is, for this, when I'm looking at it, that I'm seeing a lot of these big casts and things like that coming in from organisations like Solari, and I believe a Polish caster by the name of Easy. Forgive me, fans of Easy, I'm not as familiar with his channel, but the problem I then have with that is I love the numbers, I love the viewership, I love the exposure that TrackMania is then getting. However, I think for such a high-profile event, I also need to look at the other side of the coin in that, as I don't know, I can't vouch for their knowledge of the game for TrackMania, as in for Solari and the Polish cast. At least as far as I heard, the people who were then spectating that were not as familiar with TrackMania competitions. They were not as familiar with the players of which they were seeing, what kind of techniques were being displayed and things like that. So while yes, we are getting a lot of good numbers, again, without, I mean, of course, I don't understand French and I don't understand Polish, so I can't vouch for it directly. But at the very least, it concerns me that there's been such high numbers, and we can't just look at the numbers, as we need to take into account what are these people seeing of this, as in what are these people understanding from what they're seeing, if the people who are casting it don't know as much about the game as, say some other, say French streamers, example, Sirime knows, is a lot more of an established player within the game. Of course, your English casters, maybe CarlJr, of course, if he wasn't participating. So again, a double-edged sword with that, but definitely positives you can take from it, just from the sheer amount of eyes that are on the game is never a bad thing.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I mean, I definitely agree that there should be more like, what's the word? Well, never mind, just keep going. I'll come back to it later.
Yeah, and as this is a January recap, we will also get to other topics. But the last question about this topic, for now at least. Bits, you played it, and this is supposed to be the most prestigious event in the game, and it's the following event after the World Championship. Now that the stage 1 is over, do you actually feel that this event is crowning the best player in the game?
Well, not particularly. Well, definitely Carl showed himself to be, I think, the best player of the pack currently on those maps. But yeah, I mean, because of the format and all the system, it's very tricky to see who the best players were, and especially since it was so dependent on the last map, you couldn't quite see the raw. You couldn't trust the numbers, let's say it that way. So it was hard to judge who was actually the best of the pack.
Yeah, and Scottie, what do you think? Do you actually think that this feeling that we are going to leave after the stage 10 is done, that we have the best player actually winning it?
Well, it very much depends on what they do with the points distribution, how that's going to change going forward. I mean, say the same thing happens to Scrappy in a few more of these rounds, when he realistically could have had a very real chance at getting first, then I think it would be a very poor, as in it's a poor reflection after this round to say Scrappy is joint last. It's a very, very poor reflection of how stage 1 went, and I can't shake the feeling that we're going to see at the end of all the stages that it's not going to be properly reflecting not only who's the best player on this type of environment, but who actually performed the best overall, if you take into account all the maps that were played and such like that, as the exact example I gave of Scrappy having
Indeed.
performed really well, and being regarded as last with this current point system. I don't believe that's very fair, and again, I don't believe that's a fair reflection of his level within the top 16. But in terms of crowning the best player, it's an interesting question, because we also need to take into account that it's a new style of maps of which we're seeing, and it's not something we've seen in a competition format that's had as high exposure, it's nearly as high exposure for this for as long as I can remember, at least. So I think the question of who's going to be the best player in this environment is going to take a lot longer than just stage one to find out. It's going to take us seeing these new maps, seeing players get really settled into the format to really give us the answer of that. But I mean, it is a beta stage, so that's a good thing about it, and we can see where the land lays after 10 stages.
Yeah, and I'd like to see how it goes after these changes will be implemented. But I think as well, I'm a perfect example how it wasn't reflective of how well the players did from the results. Because I got 4th overall just because I did well on the last map. But on the other maps, I was generally around, I think, 12th place or somewhere around there. So it doesn't really reflect that I was like among the best. It wasn't at all.
Yeah, in fact, I don't understand why you should actually have this remove point system, because why punish people by taking points gained on other maps? If you want to punish people, just give them, let's say, number 9 to number 16 0 points, and then number 8 to number 1 having more points. So you will be punished, but only on that map. So you actually see what map you have done well on and then bad on, instead of having that map 5 now reflecting the whole results. I mean, the perfect example, Scrappy, who was one of the 2 best players, now is number 15 or number 16, and if you just look at the results, you're like, yeah, okay, Scrappy was playing probably shit because he's number 15, when in fact he was leading on the map 4.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and one
go ahead.
And one more point I'd like to bring up that I forgot was the fact that the one major change will be the fact that the order of the maps will be unknown moving on from step 2. So that might like counter the fact that people will only train the last map. But again, it could be a lottery if someone's good at one map and he can get an unfair advantage. And at the same token, there will be changes in the points distribution itself, because some of the places, like if you got 5th or 7th, you got the same points, and if you got like 13th, you got only like 2 points less than 5th guy. So it was really pretty unfair, and yeah, there will definitely be a lot of changes, and I'd like to see how that's gonna play out.
Yeah, the good thing that you announced that the map order will be unknown, because like you said, now you could probably just train map 4 and 5 and know that you do well, and then you probably top 4. But let's move over to another topic, and I think it's a good segment to move over to. It's a 4 Styles Cup, also endurance. Scottie, I believe you won the first cup. What do you think about this 4 Styles Cup this time?
Well, it's a format I've loved, which I suppose supports by me actually doing well in it. It's different from what we see a lot in TrackMania. The closest we really have to it is, say, the endurance events by like a Spam, or previously hosted like an FB Weekly and things like that. It's maps that are on, well, it's of course a singular map each installment of it, and it is a very difficult map. It takes a long time to master. It takes a very long time to be able to do regularly. In my opinion of it, it's at least my favourite tournament to participate in. So I mean, it's something that I would like to see much more of. But I understand 8-minute long maps that are very well calculated, very well connected, and displaying parts from all different sides of TrackMania are something that not all mappers are able to pull off. But I at least get a very good impression from this edition. There was a lot of strong players out on show. There was a very high level in this tournament, the second edition, and well, at least unfortunately for me, I came up just a tiny bit short, but at the very least, it was definitely one of my highlights in my recent TM viewpoint, both from playing and from the experience of training and participating in it.
Bits, do you think that this event is actually crowning who is the best in the game and showing what the game has to offer, because it was, for me, it was 4 styles because you actually had the backwards driving as well, so I would say there's 5 styles. Is this a showcase of what TrackMania really can be?
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely like the concept, and I'd like to see it more. And I'm not sure why it's not as popular. Maybe it's the fact that the maps are so difficult and long, and the fact that it's so hard to build, because all the styles, you need to have the knowledge of pretty much all the styles to build a decent map. And I think that's why it's not as popular. But I'd like to see it come back more. And I have like limited knowledge on the last one. I only briefly watched the VOD, and I thought Scottie was gonna win, but unfortunate for Scottie, he messed up.
Yeah.
But yeah, Scottie,
maybe you can comment on that. How did that happen, Scottie? What happened in the last round?
No, well, nothing good. It was very close between me and Shorty. I remember that much, and there was a full speed. I seem to remember it being after a wall ride, and coming down to the right, I was exiting a tiny bit too wide, and there's a little bit of track that sticks up as you go into a different block. And I clipped it. And I mean, it was millimeters between being safe and dying. And I clipped it with my left hand wheels, which meant that it bumped my car up and to the left, so I couldn't continue on the path I was going, and I flew off to the left. So I had to respawn. And due to the nature of such maps, and especially in a full speed section, it cost me about 11 seconds or something like that. And being up against a driver who's notorious of being able to handle pressure and being very well versed in multiple disciplines, Shorty himself, it was pretty much doomed from then on. So yeah, unfortunate, but I mean, I was happy I got that far.
Scottie, I was a guest at when you hosted the ESAC podcast, and I came up with something I'm proud of, because normally I have a lot of ideas, but normally people don't like them, and I understand that after a while that it's probably not the best idea. But when I made the similarities between martial arts and TrackMania, I'm still kind of proud of myself there, because you have so many multiple styles in TrackMania and you have multiple styles in mixed martial arts. Do you think that we will, or let me ask you this, how will we promote this sort of more styles and multi-styles to get bigger and to actually showcase who is the best overall in TrackMania?
Well, it's kind of a difficult point in this, because we have been trying, at the very least, of course, shout outs to Spam for putting a lot of effort into promoting tournaments which are going to be showcasing multiple styles, as in his endurance races, of course, which incorporate as many styles as they can into one map. However, they've met significant difficulties in being able to actually host the events due to a lot of server issues, which it's going to be a problem certainly going forward that will need to be resolved before large scale events like that can move forward. And I would love to be seeing more of it. Like one of my favourite events from when I was starting out was SEL, the Stadium Esports League, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
The only problem is that pretty much every player who was involved with the organisation of that, the DDE group, and Frostbull himself, are unfortunately not as certainly not as much around in the scene as they were previously. So I would love to see tournaments like this. I think SEL was a fantastic format. The Endurance Cups that Spam hosts are a fantastic format. I think once we've kind of got mappers who are capable of delivering such maps, I think if we maybe, like one of the ideas I had, for example, is have a, you get the World Championships, or the World Team Championships, so to speak, with all the different nations. I'd love to see some sort of incorporation with that between, and seeing who's the best nation on all styles, as in, say an SEL map, like you put a 3v3 and it's all-rounders that you're putting on. I would love to be seeing tournaments, team tournaments, more solo tournaments that are promoting players who are all-rounders and players who are adept at all kind of aspects of TrackMania, much as the same as exactly the analogy you're giving there in martial arts. We want to be kind of seeing players who can do it all, instead of just having players that are always playing tournaments where it's just one style and they're really good at that. It's something I think we can definitely move into, and definitely is very exciting to see.
Yeah, but why do you think that we actually have this game that we specialize instead of showing all the styles? Is it simply because the scene is too small, or is it because people like to do what they like? Let's say if they like drifting, they will go to tech, and if they like full speed, they will go to full speed, instead of being bothered training all the styles.
Yeah, I think there's an element to that. Like, people prefer different things, and yeah, I think the majority is leaning more towards technical maps. And since it's been the main style throughout the years, I think that's where people are more lenient to. And speaking of the four style maps, I think there could be more tournaments, and that would certainly help. Maybe adding some prize money to that could rise those kind of tournaments in popularity. And in terms of maps themselves, I think you could certainly have the maps like Spam would showcase in his endurance cups. Maybe you could have, for say, 2-minute maps with like 30 seconds of each style, and multiple maps. There's plenty of possibilities, but again, you have to look at if people are interested enough, and definitely if you add enough prize money, that would certainly help boost that side of the game.
Scottie, do you hope that we'll see more styles in this now Grand League, or do you hope that they focus more on technical aspect of the maps?
Well, at the very least, I hope in the beta season they don't start including more styles. And the only reason I say that is because we don't want to chop and change it too much. Because, example, at the moment, we've kind of got a kind of balanced style that all the players kind of have an opportunity of being good in. But say, for example, we start incorporating a lot more dirt maps. For example, then Papu, who is a participant and it is going to dominate. And again, I don't feel that would be a fair reflection of who would be our best players out of the whole thing. You would have Dunster, of course, a very well-versed dirt player. But that's, of course, an example. I'm not saying that they would just simply go ahead and do that, but I think it's something that should be incorporated after the beta phase, as in, look, we've reviewed the map style. This is something we'd like to include to give players, because of course you don't want a player that's, say only a tech player qualified because they've done really well on the kind of tech style maps of the qualification, now get thrown into doing a multi-style, which the precedent that was set with the qualification maps was completely different. So I think it is something I'd like to see incorporated to such an important league. Whether it will work, I'm not sure. Again, it depends what kind of players it draws to it. It depends with this new approach they're going for, quote-unquote spectator friendly, how well it would work into something like that with so many variables on offer. But it's definitely something I would like to see, but not yet. I'd say let's get the beta phase over and done with, and then kind of start messing with things, so to speak.
Agreed.
You guys have anything else to add to this 4 Styles Cup, or should we move over to the next event?
Yeah, I should have won it.
and talking about another event you should have won but was too busy to play was the man versus man. And once again we saw that the best tech player in the scene at the moment is Kappa himself. Going into that event when you were training the map, Scottie, what did you expect from this edition of the man versus man?
Well, I was quite hopeful going into it, and hopeful that I was going to be seeing a good spectacle. So there was very good players signed up. There was, of course, the records were very close, because there's not much else you can look at going into one-day events like this. The records were looking good. There was a lot of kind of high-tier players coming out. Example, your Kappa, Tween, Omnipots, Dexter, Razor, players like this. These were all kind of big names going in and playing this tournament. Even Massa showed up late on. We had Carl, of course, returning for his kind of first tournament back, so to speak. But I was looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I didn't look into it enough to actually participate myself, which was a bit of a mess up on my end, but I'll take it and I'll own it. But yeah, first impressions of the maps were very nice. I love training them. It was a nice experience, and it ended up being a lovely spectacle to watch from start to finish.
In your bits, what is your view of the 1 versus 1 instead of the normal when you have 4 people playing against each other?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting format, and it's especially fun to watch when it's the top of the top players playing against each other. And yeah, I kind of like those sort of cups, and just because all of the top players, pretty much all of them, signed up except like CarlJr and some others. So it was definitely high level, and I did try the maps myself, but I was so far behind that, and I didn't have enough time to practice. So I certainly enjoyed watching it, and especially the grand finals. I just wish it went to the third map, because it was the second map at least was really ridiculous to watch.
Yeah, you went to tennis mode there as well, and Kappa going actually undefeated throughout the whole tournament, and Dexter went into the grand final with also going undefeated. Would you say that Dexter is one of the most promising talents in the game, and a player that we can actually see getting up there in the top 6, top 5, top 4 even in tech tournaments bits?
Certainly, and I mentioned that in the podcast. I think he's going to be one of the top rising players of 2019. And well, I didn't listen to his podcast before, so I didn't know he wouldn't go to a LAN, or that's what he's saying. But if he did go, I think that's where he would unleash his true potential. But even without it, even in online tournaments, I think he's really a force to be reckoned with.
Scottie, I wrote a little article about Dexter and his chance to sort of change his own narrative. In 2018, he was most really remembered from being banned from the TrackMania Pro League Season 3, but now he's back at the biggest event in the Grand League. What do you think is at stake for Dexter himself this year?
Well, I think what's at stake for Dexter is like he's been at the top level, in my opinion. He's been one of these players who's had the capability to ascend to the next level and be one of these, exactly as you're saying, your top 6. It's for as long as I've been playing TrackMania. I mean, I remember I think if I remember correctly, he was one place from qualifying for the the Mania Planet World Cup in 2016. So I mean that's no mean feat, because those were some very, very stacked qualifiers, and to be only one space away really shows the level of talent he's had. But again, I mean we're in 2019 now, and in question of looking at what he's done since then, he's always been a very good player in team tournaments and some tournaments like CPS and such like that. And if I remember right, it was TMPL Season 1 or Season 2, I can't remember exactly. He was participating, he was looking really good at the start. It's just, I don't know I feel like it's only him that's holding himself back. Either be it his mentality, his attitude. Again, I don't know Dexter that well, so I can't really comment on it. But, I mean, for a player who can go and dominate such online records, and he's been, again, a very well-renowned team player in such team tournaments, being known for carrying teams like Mimo previously, of course, THE and such like that. I'm questioning why he isn't at the top already. That's the kind of thought in my head, and there's only so many more chances he can give himself. I feel like I think this is his next chance, but the question is, if he's been to the nearly at the top level in Mania Planet World Cup, he's had that opportunity, and then following that he didn't go to any GAs, didn't try that, he didn't go for the TMPL after Season 1, apart from getting himself banned in Season 3. I would love to see a commitment from Dexter going forward in the TMGL, but at least his track record has shown me that's something that I'm hesitant of expecting from him, and I think this is his best chance to change that on basically the highest stages, or the biggest stage he's been at. But the question is whether he'll step up to the level or the bar that he's set himself, which I think, as I'm sure I believe you said, NMD, is one of the most interesting storylines going into this.
But do you think that Dexter is gonna be remembered as this player who is quote unquote unserious and takes things lightly, or is this his actual chance and he's now mature and will use the chance, grab it by the hands, and then actually unleash the potential that Scottie is talking about that he has had for such a long time?
Yeah, it's hard to explain. I can't explain myself, even being with a team in a team with them. Like, he just decides to take these breaks out of nowhere as he started playing TMPL, and he just decided to stop out and for unknown reasons. Same for other tournaments. He was at one point pretty inactive in Miami, and that's when he decided to go to THG. That's all we know as players. And I think for such a talented player, it's a shame that he's not already known as one of the best. He's always there, like almost at the top, but no one's really comparing him to the other guys who played multiple lands or whatnot.
I'm talking about another player. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to see him take the game more serious, especially since he's so close. He's been improving lately, and I think he's very close to the top. And I think he has matured enough to say, like, okay, well, this is the time to go and push himself forward. And I hope he's going to do it.
Yeah, I certainly do, and I certainly believe so. I also think he will be attending to the Gamers Assembly if you're just convincing enough. But talking about another player who showed up at the Man vs. Man, Scottie, you mentioned that Carl was playing, the world champion from 2006. He tried his best, he actually made it to the top 16 if I recall correctly. How much has the scene changed from that time? And basically, if I ask you, what do you expect from this comeback of the world champion from 2006? Does he have any chances against the best in the game at the moment? B1ts?
I thought you went to Scottie. No, I can answer. Sure. Yeah, it was pretty impressive to see him play at such a level, considering he hasn't played for so many years. And coming back with such short notice before Man vs. Man, I think he's done pretty well. And I had the pleasure to practice with him with likes of Dexter, and there was definitely a difference in skill level, but he did try. I don't think he put all of his effort, but he definitely, you can applaud the effort that he put in, and he at least made it to top 16, and he was unfortunate enough to play Dexter in the first playoff round, so he couldn't really expect more to beat the finalist.
Scottie, what do you think about Carl? He's now, I believe, in your former team, A New Era.
Yeah, well, the as to what I expect from him, I've honestly not seen as much from him. Like, by the time I actually was in the scene, the end of 2015, I believe his last tournament he played, if I remember correctly, or at least his last LAN event, was Gamers Assembly that year, or maybe even the year before it. I would need to double check on that to confirm that, but at least from when he stopped playing, it has changed quite a bit. I mean, even if we take into account Mania Planet 4, which is a change I can understand he certainly wouldn't have been used to. And I could certainly understand having a bit of rust and not being used to the kind of stresses of competition and such, compared to what it would have been like for him had he been participating month in, month out, as he would have been had he been staying in the scene. As to what to expect from him going forward, I understand he did have a lot of motivation coming into this sort of thing, but I think we'll need to see a bit more tournaments out of him to gauge what his level is at the moment, and both what to expect if this motivation is going to be something that can stay. As we see players in some big teams coming, like dropping in and out all the time, coming back saying, you know, they do have a lot of motivation and things like that, and then a few months later they may have performed very well, but they're gone again, or things are slowing down again, they're not participating as much. And I don't know him personally, of course. I don't believe I ever had the pleasure of speaking to him, but from being out for so long, I look at that and think, how much really can he get back into things? How much really can he initiate himself back into a scene, which I can understand has changed considerably since he left it.
The last storyline for me from the Man vs. Man, and maybe the start of this January month, we had Tween and Massa both trying to qualify for the Grand League, and also they both played the Man vs. Man. Both knocked out before the semifinals, both not qualifying into the Champions mode. B1ts, what do you think about two of these players who placed top 5 at the World Championships and how they started 2019?
So you mentioned Tween, and who was the other one?
Massa.
Massa. Yeah, well, I think both of them don't seem to be too motivated at this moment. I think definitely both of them could have performed much better in man versus man. Especially, I know Massa has much better capabilities than he displayed in this one. But you have to admit that the opponents were really well prepared, and they weren't that far behind. It was just the consistency that it wasn't enough. Even the consistency, because other players were even faster than the Massas and the twins themselves. And yeah, I would like to see them take the tournament a bit more seriously. But I think there will be a time or another tournament that they will put more time and maybe get another top placements.
Scottie, what do you think about two of these top 5 players?
Well, especially for the man versus man, I heard that Tween had some issues which resulted in him going out, or at least having trouble in the middle of the tournament. I don't know if it was PC issues or something like that. So I guess a bit of an asterisk to him going out a bit early there. Massa, I know, only started preparing on extremely short notice, but I suppose the question of how well Massa actually does is dependent on two things: how much effort he actually puts into his preparation, which in this was not really there at all. If he only started training, I believe it's a few days before at most. And then secondly, what kind of momentum he gets going, which if he didn't manage to get his momentum going, perhaps a compounding factor with not putting as much preparation in, not getting that kind of regular kind of feel to the map, and getting that kind of that power that he has, then he's not going to perform to his full capability. And it's always disappointing to see players with such high levels of skill that don't perform to their fullest as a result of that. But of course, I mean, you can't expect players to be 100% all the time. With respect to with reference, to the TMGL, with that, I feel those players again have been a bit victims of the slot distribution and such, which we talked about on the ESAC podcast, with, of course, Tween having to go against two very, very strong players in Kappa and Danik B, who were both very well prepared, and Massa having an extremely well stacked German, Austrian and Swiss qualifier to go against. And I suppose you're never going to be guaranteed a slot and such things like that. I definitely think they could have taken it, but it's hard to look at these sort of players as, without being them, you don't know how committed they are to such events. Of course, Tween, renowned especially for big events, training offline and such, and he's not very much of a person you see on Discords all the time. He doesn't stream and things like that, so it's always a bit hard to gauge what his commitment level is going in. And Massa, you'll be able to see it, but you never truly know what Massa will show up on the day. It's just one of those things. But I expected that there might have been some upsets. I expected at the very least one of them wouldn't go through. Maybe not both of them, but at least the people who beat them were deserving of the slots of which they held in both the man versus man and the TMGL, to be honest. That's my impression of it. But a shame to, of course, not see players with such talent being part of these later stages of the tournaments.
Yeah, now they're actually out from the biggest online event, at least, and pretty much having just the Gaming Winterfest and the Gamers Assembly left to play themselves. What do you think how can this motivate them or unmotivate them bits?
Well, I think if you're talking about Tween especially, he's definitely more oriented towards LAN tournaments, and I'm not surprised he didn't do that well in this man versus man. And I'm not sure exactly how you. I guess. Well, I definitely say you need like more LAN tournaments, because I think both of them are more motivated to play when there's say LAN instead of online tournaments. I think it carries more weight for them.
What do you think, Scottie? We have, I believe, Master joined your stream yesterday, and he said that he will decide about his TrackMania career today. I've yet to speak to him today, but what do you make of it? They are missing out on the biggest online event and having pretty much just 2 events left to play in the first half of this year.
Well, again, the impression I got with Massa, I'll draw back to the sense of I can understand this having a negative effect on them because it is the marquee event. Of course, it's organised by Nadeo. Of course, Softy having a big hand of things. Apparently, there's a lot of other kind of orgs or things going on in the background. So it's definitely nothing that these sort of players want to be missing out on. I can understand with the format and such it being a bit of a shock to the system, perhaps being a reason why they weren't participating, or why they didn't reach the later stages. But I mean, going forward for these players, Tween he's always been able to kind of continue on regardless. He always manages to pull it off in these big LAN events anyway. Again, maybe he is just kind of saving himself for this going forward. Massa, I would draw it back again to his momentum. Of course, Massa had one of the most well-renowned streaks in TM with the grand finals he'd reached in a row, and that was broken at Giants Cup, if I remember correctly, and he again failed to reach it in the TMWC, and going forward, failing to get through much of the man versus man, and then also failing the qualifier for the TMGL. I can understand having a big impact in his motivation, when his motivation, at least the impression I've got from him, has always been relatively fragile, depending on how much momentum he's got, if he's performing well in tournaments, if he's feeling training and such like that. I don't know what to expect from Massa going forward. He has a bit of he's a riddle that I don't know how to solve, so to speak. Again, he's the only person who'll know how he'll perform going forward, I guess, and of course he's the only one that knows what's going inside his own head, especially if, exactly as you were saying, some of the things he was saying in stream recently. I've not managed to catch up with him as to a bit of background on that. I can only hope things are kind of going all right for him, but again, I'm interested. It's another storyline to bring up with these. It's another storyline that's been created as a result of these players not reaching these tournaments and what lies ahead from them. So I'm definitely interested to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, and talking about storylines, one of the biggest stories from this January month is this announcement of this new cup, Revival Cup or something like that. At least it's more known for being remembered as the $40,000 event. B1ts, how much have you looked into this event, and what do you think about this event? Will we see this event taking place January 2020?
Well, that's still a long time from now on, and I'll be honest, I barely looked into it, so I can't really comment much about it. But at the moment, it looks honestly too good to be true. But I'm hoping I'll be proven wrong, and yeah, that's about as much as I can say. It looks like an interesting tournament.
Interesting to say the least. Scottie, do you have any looked into this or have any thoughts about seeing a $42,000 event in TrackMania?
My main concerns with this, because I love any sort of initiative that players are taking, organisers are taking to bring something to TrackMania, but when you look at the headline they put up, 42,000, TrackMania tournament, so on and so forth, it looks fantastic in paper, but looking into it, it did give me a bit of concerns. Not only as to, again, what's then going to happen with this. I mean, there was the fact that there's going to be, I think it's a €100 buy-in for the players. Now, well, I'm sure people will do that if there's a big prize pool on offer. I think it was poorly timed for the announcement, because they did say that they didn't actually have, that the 42,000 was pending upon people actually, like the sponsors actually coming through and stuff like that, which I think it's not really a good idea to put your neck on the line, so to speak, when you don't know if all the other pieces are falling into place. And as well, when I was looking into it, a few question marks were popping up in my head. Example, that they're wanting to do basically what would be probably the highest profile TrackMania tournament ever. They're announcing it now when they plan on having the tournament in 2020, which is a whole lot of time in advance. And they're planning on doing it on Minitech, which was a big question mark in my head. Again, maybe they're kind of drawing inspiration with shaking up what's kind of been expected and what's kind of been the norm for TrackMania, with, with TMGL kind of breaking up the normal standard. But it's raised a lot of question marks for me, some which I'm waiting for a lot of them to be answered before I do form my opinion on it. But it's hard to know what to expect from it. It's such early stages, and there's so much little information that's concrete about it. But again, something definitely to keep our eyes on, and certainly hope it all works out as the organisers are wanting.
Yeah, and a lot of questions. We are waiting answers for many questions, and I believe we have a date with him on Friday. So let's see if I can get some questions then, or if I will leave with more questions, because at the moment, yeah, there are so many questions about how this is gonna work out, and how do you get someone to sponsor $42,000 in TrackMania. I mean, I myself struggled to find a sponsor for €300, so I used 2 years for that. So that's says the least for that. But do you think that? Okay, let's just move over to the TrackMania, the another news, because we are already getting close to 1 hour. For many, the biggest story in this January month was that ZeratoR is no longer partner with CarlJr and Bren, and 2 weeks after they joined this new team, Solari. Bits, how much do you like to look into conspiracy theories, and why do you think that ZeratoR decided to stop sponsoring CarlJr and Bren?
Well, it could purely be speculation on my part, and I certainly don't have any insight on why that happened. But maybe ZeratoR didn't see the great interest in TrackMania anymore. Maybe he didn't see the return on investment, if to say so. I'm not exactly sure, and I wouldn't want to speculate too much because it's just conspiracy theories, as you say.
Scottie, do you have any idea on why this happened and why this partnership is now over?
Well, the thing that I think about this is it's a bit of a weird one, because I wouldn't really look at it as upon return to investment for ZeratoR, considering he's already put like thousands of euros into TrackMania without having any players representing him in the sense of the ZeratoR Cups he's put forward. So I don't think that's as much what he's worrying about here. I remember, well, I suppose since you're not a guest in this podcast, NMD, I'll bring up what we were talking about regarding that, is perhaps with ZeratoR sponsoring 2 players who are participating in a lot of tech tournaments, perhaps outside of his own events, of course, any ZeratoR Cups he is hosting and things like that, which I can only hope he intends to continue hosting. It's of course a great feature for him and a great feature for the TrackMania tournament, bringing a lot of eyes to both sides. But perhaps it's seen as maybe he's going, instead of getting involved in TrackMania less, he may be getting involved in TrackMania more, as in maybe more in the advertising side of things or the exposure side of things, or maybe it's some sort of other unknown involvement, perhaps in discussions with Nadeo. And maybe as a result of this, there cannot then be the conflict of interest, having him directly representing 2 of the players who are participating in some of the top events and the sort of things he would then be leaning his exposure to. So, I mean, I suppose that's a bit of a conspiracy theory as to whether or not we will be seeing it. Of course, I'm sure it's all behind closed doors, as I suppose we didn't really see the behind closed doors reason for them actually switching to the other teams anyway. I've not spoken to any of them since, and it's private information. I'm not going to go asking them about it, but I'm sure there's more than meets the eye to this, but I can only hope it's positive more than negative, of course, but I'll certainly be interested to see.
Yeah, I spoke to Softy B about this a little bit, and he said that maybe ZeratoR has already made his choice, because he is an event hoster and is also at the time sponsoring events or sponsoring players. So that's conflict of interest. Maybe some people would draw the conclusion that CarlJr wins the ZeratoR Cup because he's sponsored by ZeratoR, and ZeratoR makes it easier for him, or moves the event in a way that he can actually win it. What do you think about this sort of dilemma bits? Because we also have Softy B, who is the admin of the Grand League that you are playing, and we also have 3 players from his organization playing there. Is there a conflict of interest? And do you believe that event organizers should not have any players playing the event that they host?
Well, I'm not entirely buying the conflict of interest angle, because it's been prevalent in many games, and especially in like CSGO, if you follow that, there's plenty of that. And sure, it could be a reason, but I don't think there's so, or let's say ZeratoR is so like worrying about it that he decided to drop those players. at the same time, like maybe he decided to move to another game. Like we don't know for it. But as talking about the Grand League and Softy owning 3 of the players in the cup that he's playing, yeah, that's certainly a slight conflict of interest. But I think, and especially in TrackMania, it's not been so prevalent, and I don't think people are abusing the system or trying to abuse it or get. Or I don't think Softy is gonna like make it easier for his guys to win it, and yeah, that's my opinion.
What do you think, Scottie? Because some people, maybe not the smartest people, but they have said that of course he's make 3 slots for France because they have 3 players from Gamers Origin playing in France, and they also make 1 slot for UK because they have Pack from UK. Is there some? Do Softy B needs to make a choice? Should it be an event organizer or should it be the admin and team leader of Gamers Origin?
Well, first of all, I think the most important thing with this is I don't think the scene is big enough to be making moves like that. As in, I don't think we could then say to Softy, look, you cannot be part of Gamers Origins and host tournaments at the same time, because I mean, there isn't enough people to step into the shoes of that, respectively. As in, there's not enough team tournament organisers we could just have step into those shoes. I mean, you could also look at, say, for example, Axel Alex being allowed to do the TMM stuff when he's also an organizer of it and things, and is he allowed to play in it and things like that. I don't think the scene is big enough to be making kind of moves like that and imposing such restrictions on it. I mean, I suppose the other, if you were in the camp saying, oh, you know, Softy's making it easier for Gamers Origins players, then you could also look at it on the other side of things, as in both the kind of 2 main parties in this, Nadeo and Softy being French and having 3 spots in the qualifier. If you're from that side of things, you could look at that and I suppose start complaining about it or whatever. But the key thing is to remember, if you're looking at this objectively, there is arguments for why this is happening. There is arguments for why there's 3 slots for France, why there's slots for Britain and things like that. You know, you need to be reasonable when you're taking into account things like this, and take into account that while it may look that way to some, if you're looking at only one side of it, then sure. But I mean, you don't get a balanced outlook by only looking at one side of things.
Yeah.
It's you need to take into account all factors in this, and I don't think that's anything at all of what Softy or Nadeo are trying to accomplish here. I just think it's you know, they've put a system in place, and that's how it's all came about. Gladly, I don't think that's a problem we need to worry about in TM, and I can certainly hope it's something we don't need to worry about going forward.
Yeah, and because there were only like 16 slots, there were always going to be issues with it, and the fact there was 3 slots for France, I think it's very reasonable, since it's like the origin of the game, France, and there's like the most players at all levels from that region. So it totally makes sense that there were 3 players from that, and I don't think it was in any way linked to Softy owning 3 players of Gamers Origin.
Do you have any topics from January that missed out on, or should we just move over to the February part of this and the preview?
Not at all from me, no.
Yeah, nothing springs to mind. Let's move on.
Let's move on, and maybe this can create some debate, because we have the TrackMania Masters coming up, the Team Cup hosted by them. Who is the favorites going into this? We have the power rankings by some community members, and we have M&M Gaming at spot number 1, here represented by Scottie, and you have Venture at spot number 2, represented by B1ts. B1ts, going into this event, who do you see as the main favorite? Is it M&M Gaming taking their 2nd title in a row?
Well, again, because it's the easier maps than the ESL competitions or the World Cup competitions, it's definitely more of a Wild West, and I think there's multiple candidates, so you could begin with the top, at least four teams. That would be M&M, Venture, I guess what is called now, Runtime, and Elementaries, if they decide to go for it. But yeah, it could be many more teams. There will definitely be upsets, in my opinion, just because of the format, and we still don't know how the groups will look like, and other like things like that.
Scottie, what do you expect going into this event? Are M&M Gaming gonna let the ball roll now that they have their first team title ever accomplished in December, and they will just continue the streak now?
Well, I think they're carrying a lot of momentum coming off of their first team tournament, since it was something that's been coming for a long time. But I mean, if I'm looking at it as objectively as I can, of course, I can understand I might have a bit of natural bias as being part of the team, but you also need to take into account for a team that's just came off of such a euphoric high, so to speak, as in winning their first tournament they've been waiting for such a long time, is taking into account also. Following that, you think we've finally done it. Now we can relax a bit, and I can understand the laziness perhaps coming into the next tournaments. Now they know they have accomplished what was their main goal. So I'll be interested to see what to expect from my fellow teammates. I know personally I won't be focusing as much on it. Of course, TMM's never been my most favourite of tournaments, but of course with some LAN events coming forward, it'll be also interesting to take into account, well, TMM obviously won't be lasting for that long, but with GWF and GA coming up, then you need to also take into account that some of the top teams will have a lot of representatives at these LAN events, which may compromise their ability in this specific team tournament. So there's definitely perhaps some surprises which could come about, and teams that could capitalise simply as a result of those that may or may not be available as a result of these events coming up.
Certainly. Oh, go on.
What team is actually, from the last one, the CPS hosted by TrackMania Stars, what teams do you think is the stronger now? Because we see that M&M Gaming have recruited Serbi, they have ZeratoR back, and we also look at Venture, they now have Shumi back, who is now seems to be motivated again. We can look at the other UB team, has Yo-Yo signed up for them, Chrono signed up for them. We have Elementaries with Spam signing up and playing for them at the moment. What team do you think is the strongest from the previous team tournament and going into this one? B1ts, if you can start.
Oh, well, it has to be M&M just because of the momentum they're carrying. But at the same time, I think the Venture guys are definitely feeling sort of bad for not making it into the playoffs of what was the tournament called?
CPS.
Yeah, CPS. Just because we couldn't make it through the groups, I think they're seeking for revenge, and this might be the place to unleash their full potential. So I don't know. It's a double-edged sword, but I think any of these teams could win, and there could be another upsets in terms of maybe Elementaries will upset any of these teams, and we'll see how it plays out.
Scottie, if you have to name a player that can be this MVP player who can bring the team sort of to the victory by himself, or at least be the main reason for that victory, who would that player be and for what team?
I mean, if I'm looking outside of, I'll kind of go for a bit of an outside pick here. Well, maybe not an outside pick. Is of course you look at the players who are notoriously good on short maps and things like that. You look at your Dexters, your Magorians, and things like that. Someone who I'm very interested to see and who has just rejoined with his team is Ken's. I remember, I think it was very early on in 2018 or at the end of 2017 when Ken's was motivated for PKD, Lioncast he was at the time, and when he went into PKD, Ken's was trailblazing. He was firing through all of his opponents in his path. He was taking out everyone, no matter what map it was. He was setting top 3 deadies in pretty much every track he played. So I would love to see that kind of Ken's again, and I think he can set the world alight again. But I know lately there's been a lot of issues which have prevented him from committing as much to the game. But if the stars align, I can see Ken's being a potential MVP candidate for TMM.
Do you have any players, B1ts, that you think can bring the team into the finals and taking home the title?
Well, it's team for team basis, so there's just so many players to look at. So you got Dexter, but again, since he's playing with DHE, some of the guys can't really keep up with him, and I think that's one factor why they're not reaching the grand finals on those stages. And looking at other teams, you're right, PKD is definitely a candidate, but we don't know much about their motivation. And guy like Gans, who is really like super fast, and he can be at the very top if he wants to be, but he seems to be motivated in some periods and then demotivated. So I'm not sure how the other guys feel in that team. And again, speaking of M&M and Venture, there's just so many good players that any of them could show up in the important matches. So it's really hard to distinguish between those.
Let's do a prediction here. I nailed the man versus man. I said that Capo would win it in front of Dexter. Now let's do a prediction for the TrackMania Masters Team Cup. B1ts, who's coming to the final and who is winning the final?
Oh, okay. Give me a second. Well, I just want to see M&M and Venture fight for the first place, so I'll say that. And of course, I'm biased, so I'll say Venture wins. Why not?
Scottie, what is your prediction? Who is making it to the final and who will stand as the team in the end?
Well, for me, it's going to be interesting because there's a lot of teams with quite a few storylines going into it, which is going to decide who's going to eventually come out on top, as in exactly what I was saying regarding M&M coming off of a tournament win, and if they can keep up that momentum or if they will kind of take a step back, so to speak. But going forward, I think Venture are definitely going to find themselves at least in the top 4. I'll put them as one of my picks for the final. And depending on how things work out for the LAN events and the motivation for M&M, if the stars align for them, I definitely see them as being in the final. But at the risk of earning myself some beatings, I will also say PKD are a strong pick for the final. But it's hard to go against teams like Elementaries and UB Team as well, but they're too unpredictable for my liking, and I don't know what to expect from them. So I'll say PKD also looking for their own dose of revenge, having came up so close in CPS and finally looking to get their mojo back. But I'm thinking either one of the 3 of Venture, M&M and PKD, and it's too close to call between me for me as to who will come out on top, I'm afraid.
Sitting on the fence there. Okay, then I go ahead.
I'm being safe.
I think the final will be against M&M Gaming and Venture. It seems like those are the 2 giants in the Team Cup, and I believe this format suits the defending champion in the TrackMania Masters Team Cup, Venture, the best, and I'll go and pick them. I have only one. Go ahead, Spitz.
No. I'm just glad you picked us against
just a little celebration there.
Yeah.
Don't celebrate too early. The matches are yet to be played.
Well, I won't play them, so
that's why
it's up to my team.
That's why I picked them, you know.
Yeah, okay.
But I only have one spot left for me, at least. Scottie, you brought it up that you are told that the map pack for Gaming Winterfest will be out tomorrow. And if you look at the sign-ups for this event so far, I believe we have 5 sign-ups, and one of those sign-ups are just an extra spot for Team Sampi to have at the event, so they are sure that they will have place around themselves to play the event. What is your concern going into February and the month where people has to sign up for the event that kicks off the first weekend of March? Do you think people will actually go to the event, or can we actually end up with a tournament with less than 10 people?
Well, I think Gaming Winterfest unfortunately earned themselves a bit of a bad reputation with the amount of issues that happened at the previous iterations. I mean, always getting to this time of year, I'm going to have worries because of my luck going to LAN events has been well documented, shall we say. My concerns are that not a lot of people are going to sign up, but it always seems to be. I mean, I always find myself checking the sign-ups page, and TrackMania players always leave it late to kind of commit themselves to things like this. I mean, notably, I think there's one French person signed up, which certainly isn't going to be a representation by when all's said and done. There's definitely going to be a good number of French representatives there, since they've not got as much in the line if it does go up shit creek without a paddle, so to speak. So I definitely expect to be seeing more people, but as to how many, I'm not sure. I can imagine a good amount of people saving themselves for GA, but that is definitely a big worry for me going forward, since I'm definitely going. But it's something, it's a bit of a concern, but as long as it's going to go ahead and things like that, I'm sure the people that will go there, the people that will watch it and things like that will at least hopefully have a good time, and hopefully the issues will be sorted.
What do you think about this, Spitz? Can this actually be the last time we see Gaming Winterfest being hosted, depending on how many players from TrackMania are signing up?
Well, if they organize it as poorly as last year, then certainly there could be a chance that it would be a last one. And I think it's a big factor because some of the players surely must remember how terrible it was to wait. What was it, like 8 hours or more since the first matches started? And I think they were a lot frustrated with it, and they might not want to do it anymore if they're not sure if their organization is going to be better. So I think that's definitely a factor. But also, you have to mention the fact that at the same time, the Grand League is going on, so some of the players might choose that over Gaming Winterfest and just not attend it at all, which is again an issue in on itself.
What do you think if we miss Gaming Winterfest? I'm drawing maybe too early of a conclusion, but then we are left with just Gamers Assembly next year. Is the tech scene going downwards now?
Yeah, well, it would be definitely sad to see if they did go under, but it could go down unless there will be other tournaments to replace them, and I'm not entirely sure what kind of tournaments those would be. Well, a Grand League is certainly one of them, but I'm not sure if there's any others on the way, but some might pop up, you never know.
If my info is correct, and I believe Hyllis himself said it in the Discord channel, that they're actually sponsoring this Gaming Winterfest event, so maybe they will keep continuing hosting and sponsoring that event. But Scottie, this topic about tech, SoftyB said that tech is dead. Maybe now we see less people signing up for one of the two only tech events announced for an offline event. What is your conclusion so far about the tech scene and how it's moving forward?
Well, for one, I've not seen the as to why he believes it's dead. I suppose he'll have quite a good insight on it, being at the kind of forefront of organising such things. I wouldn't agree with saying tech is dead in a sense, because if anything, we're seeing a lot of players coming in. Well, we are seeing players going out at the same time. But example, look at last year with the amount of events we had popping up that weren't there before. Of course, we did miss out in the World Championships in 2017. We had them return in 2018 to much renown, as in it was a very, very well received tournament. A lot of people enjoyed it. A lot of people want to see that sort of thing again. We had Giants Cup, which was the best LAN event I've been to, the most well organised, and again, very well received, and an incredible amount of people turned out for it. Gamers Assembly last year had a very, very high level of participant, with pretty much all of your big names in TrackMania going there. And well, Gaming Winterfest, is a bit of a question mark, and as to, especially with Softy being the driving force behind TMPL and TMWC, as to the question mark that kind of lies over that head. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people would have seen. I'd certainly advise, eCorp might be out of the picture, but definitely keep an eye on the Discord for Mass and Omnipots, of course, the organisers of Giants Cup, as they're teasing they've got an announcement in the works. So perhaps something to look forward to there, but perhaps him seeing tech is dead would explain his kind of commitment going forward to TMGL. Whether that's as a direct result of him now saying tech is dead, I don't agree with him personally, but again, that might be because I'm more on the outside looking in. Maybe I'm more of a player looking in, so to speak. But I'm looking forward to the future, and I definitely think there is definitely still some miles left in TrackMania.
Yeah. And since you mentioned the phrase like tech is dead, I did have a conversation with Softy, and while we didn't agree on much common ground, I'm much more on your side. But I think it's more important to explain what he meant, well, in my understanding. And basically, I think he's just bored of tech, since it was the only or the main style for the past maybe 10 years or even more. And especially it helps with his case that some of the players actually agree with him, some of the top players. And I think, in the contrary, the competition is at the top, especially, is more fierce than ever in technical maps or in technical competitions. You could see it in man versus man. You see the newcomers like Dexter and Kappa, who weren't there before, or they stopped playing and now they're back again. And if you look especially at the World Championship, you couldn't call who was going to win that one, especially in the grand finals. And I think because it's so close, it's going to be more interesting to watch and more unpredictable. And yeah, I think it's got a bright future.
I'm running out of stuff. Do you guys have anything that you want to add to this podcast? We have 1 hour and 20 minutes. So I believe just go ahead and pick any topic you want to talk about if you have any. Again, awkward silence or...
You gotta have a think.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bit of a stacked month to start us off with. At the very least, I suppose we can look back on it, and it's not exactly been everything's been kind of sunshine and roses, so to speak. There has been problems, but the fact is there's a lot of discussion, and I, for one, will say that I'm very happy to see the amount of different parties that are getting into these discussions. We're seeing casual play. Example, you look at the TMGL Discord. Despite how it did kind of transcend into a bit of a negative discussion, we're seeing that players who are casual players getting involved in those discussions, players who don't play at all. Well, of course, players who don't play at all. People who don't play TrackMania at all. We're seeing established players both at the lower end of the skill level, mid-tier, high level. We're seeing players that have since retired getting involved, casters, developers, organisers, all getting involved in discussions, and hopefully it's a good sign, at the very least, to me, seeing that everyone's willing to get into these discussions. And I can only hope that's it looks like it's spelling good things going forward. The fact that there's a lot more transparency and there's a lot more people having their voices being heard. So I think this month, despite there being a little bit of bumps so far, is putting us on a good road so far, and I can only hope the rest of the year kind of lives up to that.
Yeah, but is this month a good month for you?
Well, for me, I don't know. For me, just because I qualified for the Grand League, I mean, it's certainly a good month and it's looking good for me. But for the scene, it's definitely a stacked month. There was a lot happening, and we might not see such a big activity in the upcoming months. But at the same point that Scottie, I need to stop calling you Softy. It's ridiculous.
Thanks.
Wait, what was the exact point you brought up again at the very end?
No, I was saying that I thought it was a good year, and that I think we'll kind of be looking forward to more going forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Nadeo getting more involved with not only with the players themselves, and I would like to see them more talking to other guys like yourselves, especially you two, who are more involved in the scene and might, just because you're more like, how should I say, you've got some good minds for the game, and I think you can see it more from the casual perspective, and I think they could listen to someone like you guys and other players and just other people in the scene, and not so much just the casual players on Discord who just have their own opinion and don't really research it that much.
Do you have any wishes for some guests that you guys want to see on a podcast in February?
Well, I'm happy as long as you're here, NMD, I will say. I mean, there's some players I would like to see getting more involved in group discussions. I'd especially be interested to see Softy having discussions with people and things like that. Hillis also kind of insight into his mind with some other people who are going to be asking him some difficult questions will very much be interesting. But for those who are going to be perhaps presenting new projects going forward, example, Mass and Omnipots and such, I'm excited to see what they've got upcoming. It'll be interesting to kind of hear from them. But yeah, I mean, of course, there's always the norm to go for, like, what are Frostbill and Carrion up to in 2009?
Oh, yes.
You know, we've still got that question to be answered.
Every month. Every month I get that question. When is Scottie coming?
Yeah, one person who I would like to see, perhaps, maybe some of the players we've been seeing performing in a lot of the team tournaments going forward, like Magorian getting involved, perhaps if he's interested, players like maybe Revolution and Beat having a big hand in M&M's win. So maybe players like that, as to they don't often get the platform to have their opinions and such like that. Maybe they're not interested in it, of course, I don't know, but I'd be interested to see what their kind of thoughts are, and maybe CarlJr and Bren being the kind of the poster child, so to speak, for the likes of Solari, and at the forefront of such projects as TMGL as some of the leading players. It would be interesting to see their output and things like this. Not to say, of course, our man Bits being fourth position currently after stage one isn't one of our poster boys, but French game, Nadeo, we got to have our representatives from the home side,
Indeed. And to that point, I agree with most of your picks, and I think there are a lot of players who are uprising and definitely should be heard about their perspective on the game and their future. And I definitely like to see Hillis and his opinion on the entire Grand League thing. And also, I'll just end with Get Kimmy, the uprising venture star.
Man, so many people are mentioning this guy.
Yeah, I'm sure he won't do it, but I just wanted to mention it. Because I think he would be interesting, yes, but he doesn't seem to want to talk, unfortunately.
I will make him talk.
And as long as you're here, I'm happy to listen to you to talk to anyone.
Oh, that's good to hear. But I guess we can round it off now. If you have any final words, and if I have a final question, when is the next ESAC podcast, Mr. Host himself, Scottie?
Well, I think we will have a few topics to round ourselves out with, especially as I've been bringing up multiple times, whatever announcement Omnipots and Mass have got cooking. I believe that's certainly a topic we can look into. And once the kind of ground's been set for TM GL, we can kind of round up on how that's going. So we've definitely got some things to look forward to. Not to worry, we'll get our next episode up relatively soon, I think, with some LAN events as well coming up. So we'll see. We'll get ourselves out there, don't you worry.
And Bits, how is it to be a back-to-back guest, and how do you like being part of this discussion instead of just talking about yourself?
Well, it's certainly interesting to get your opinions out and just bounce the ideas off to other people and see how they respond. It's certainly more interesting than talking to yourself or some other people in the team and not really getting any feedback or little feedback on the matter. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say.
I guess we can close it up. Where do people find you, if they want to find you? Twitter?
Well, for me, I'm like
hard to
I
find.
barely use Twitter, but yeah, it's probably at BitsTM for TrackMania, and usually I'm hanging around the likes of Discord and Skype, and yeah, people can find me if they want.
Scottie, promote
if you
yourself.
want to find me, yeah, all of my social links are at TM Scotsman. I won't lie to you, I don't really post much on them anymore. You're welcome to come in and see my last year's posts or something like that. Otherwise, hit me up in Discord. You can find me in pretty much every kind of notable TrackMania server. I'm not in any way trying to, put shit on any of the Discords I'm not in, of course. I'll put that out there so no one shouts at me in Discord. But yeah, hit me up there. That's where I'm going to be active or on the bear, once every 2 weeks I actually stream at TM Scotsman, of course.
That's it, I guess. We see you next month, I guess, with the same guys. Bye-bye, guys.
See ya.
See ya.